Good morning.
Morning.
I almost didn't know who Pat was talking about there for a minute. You kind of forget. It's a real honor for me to be here on this special day. Memorial Day is an annual holiday to honor all the armed service personnel killed in the wars in the defense of our country. It was originally called Decoration Day. It was first observed on May 30th, 1868, for the purpose of decorating the graves of American Civil War dead. It was observed on May 30th until 1971, when most states adopted the new federal schedule for holidays and observances. In recent times, we've also included fallen firemen and policemen, as well as others who gave their lives in the performance of duties to their country and our society. The forerunner of Memorial Day was born on November 19th, 1863, and I thought it was kind of appropriate to kind of go back to that time, seeing how it's the 150th anniversary of the Civil War. And it was done that day when President Abraham Lincoln came to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania to dedicate a new national cemetery to the brave soldiers who died in the battle that was the turning point of the war. I would like to share with you a portion of that immortal address. I quote, "We meet on a great battlefield of war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those here who gave their lives that a nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But, in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note, nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which those who fought here have thus so nobly advanced. It is rather for us here to be dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from those honored dead we take increased devotion to the cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that the government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from this earth." That was back then. I'd like to go forward to now. During a speech delivered in St. Louis on November 13th, Marine Corps Lieutenant General John F. Kelly recalled the sacrifices made by 2 Marines in Iraq. In April of 2008, 2 Marine Infantry battalions, 1st Battalion 9th Marines, known as the Walking Dead for those of you who are familiar with it from the Vietnam War, and 2nd Battalion 8th Marines were switching out in Ramadi, known at that time as the most dangerous city on the earth and the city which was owned by Al-Qaeda. 1 battalion was closing out their deployment and the other just starting their 7-month tour. A couple years ago, security cameras recorded 2 Marines, a Corporal Jonathan Yale, 22 years of age, and Lance Corporal Jordan Herder, 20, one from each of those battalions, were on duty outside a barracks housing 50 Marines in Ramadi. The barracks was also home to 100 Iraqi policemen. Yale was a dirt-poor mixed-race kid from Virginia, with a wife, a mother, and a sister who all lived with him. He supported them all on a salary of less than $23,000. Herder, on the other hand, was a middle-class white kid from Long Island. They were from very different worlds. A large blue truck loaded with 2,000 pounds of explosives headed in their direction. Nearby, Iraqi police did what most normal people facing certain death would do. They fled. Not the 2 Marines. Knowing that they only had seconds to live, they stood their ground, fired their weapons non-stop at the truck, and died in the ensuing blast. According to the security footage, the men did not even step back. They never shifted their weight. With their feet spread shoulder-width apart, they leaned into the danger, firing as fast as they could, probably each not knowing what the outcome was going to be. Not enough time to think of their families, their country, or their flag, but more than enough time to do their duty. These are the type of people that are protecting us around the world. Their actions saved countless lives. And General Kelly himself knows of great sacrifice. Just 4 days before telling about the heroism of the Marines, General Kelly's own son, Second Lieutenant Robert M. Kelly, was killed in action in Afghanistan. We must honor and remember our fallen, but that alone is not enough. They died not just for their country, but for their comrades serving next to them. The United States would have survived if Corporal Yale and Lance Corporal Hurd had fled from their post, but the Marines serving them would not have. They died protecting those with whom they served. The lives saved are their legacy. Shakespeare wrote of the bond between warriors in Henry V, and I quote, "We few, we happy few, we band of brothers, for he that shed his blood with me shall be my brother." End quote. More than 1 million American service members have died in wars that our nations have been involved in since the first colonial soldiers took up arms in 1775. Many of them died protecting one another, but they served us so we could keep the things we love the most: God, country, and family. By remaining true to these principles, we honor their sacrifice. Observances like this are happening in communities all across America, but there can never be too many of them. As the unofficial beginning of summer, we must never lose focus of what Memorial Day truly means. It's not about the beaches, or picnics, or automobile races. It's a day to remember and to reflect upon. It's a day to remember men like Army Sergeant First Class Lance Vogler, 29 years old, from Savannah, Georgia, gave to his country repeatedly until he made this extreme sacrifice on October 1, 2010. He was serving his 8th tour. That's quite an outstanding number. His 8th tour in Afghanistan after serving 4 tours in Iraq. That's 12. Yeah, 12 tours of duty in both wars in just over 9 years since the 9/11 attacks. This husband and father gave to his country until he simply had nothing left to give. We must never forget what these heroes have done and what their loved ones have lost. There are many ways to remember our fallen heroes: the traditional way, with flowers and flags for their graves, or attending services and observances such as this. If you ask our heroes before they died how they'd like to be honored, most would probably say, "Take care of my family." That's why Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore, who was a commanding officer in the Battle of the Ai-Drang Valley, and for those of you unfamiliar, that was the first major battle of the Vietnam War, and they made the movie and the book, We Were Soldiers Once and Young. And he said that the last words many soldiers dying on the battlefield are, "Tell my wife I love her." That is also why in his second inaugural address, Abraham Lincoln included widows and orphans when he pledged that the government would care for him who shall have borne the battle. Remembering our fallen once a year is not enough. The widows, widowers, fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, and children, they have to remember them every day. The empty seat at the dinner table, the smaller gathering on Thanksgiving, and the voice of a loved one heard only as a distant memory in one's mind are constant reminders that they are gone. Whether one fought in World War II, Korea, the jungles of Vietnam, the Middle East, or elsewhere, the stories of American heroism and sacrifice continue to resonate. From a more personal perspective, when I returned home from Vietnam for the final time in April of 1970, after serving 26 months in country, I, along with so many other Vietnam veterans, were not treated with very much respect. We were called horrible names, and the American people made us feel unwelcome. Each of us, in his or her own way, had to learn how to cope and endure with our mixed emotions. knowing in our hearts that we did what our country had set us to do, yet trying to figure out why our fellow citizens were so hostile towards us. Couldn't quite figure it out. Over the years, I feel that I have somehow forgiven the American people for the way I was treated, but I stand before you and say I will never, ever forget the way my fellow Vietnam veterans and I were treated. That is why it's so important, no matter how long the present conflicts that we are engaged in go on, we must not take our frustrations that we have with our government out on the men and women our government has sent into battle. I think that Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore said it best, and I quote, "Hate war, love the warrior." I think that about sums it up. The preamble to the Constitution of the American Legion calls on us to preserve the memories and instances of our associations in the Great Wars. It is important that all veterans, their families, and in fact all Americans, pause to reflect upon, remember, and give thanks to our many heroes. We owe them no less. And I kind of want to go away from the honoring the fallen to make one comment. During our lifetime, there are many people we meet that have great impact on our lives, I think. And in closing, I would like to recognize and thank one of those people, a very close friend of mine, Jack Elverson. Jack Elverson was a community member here, him and his wife Millie, and he fought as a Marine in Korea with the 1st Marine Division at the Chosin Reservoir. And Jack was the one who inspired me to be a Marine. I think he recognized a young man who was headed for trouble. And I really believe that he thought I could use a little discipline and maybe a challenge. And I think that I joined up just to prove him wrong or something, I don't know. But my time in the Marine Corps in Vietnam taught me certain principles that changed my life forever. They taught me discipline. They taught me leadership, responsibility. They taught me how to make a decision, and if the decision you make is wrong, that doesn't prevent you from still making decisions. And most importantly, they taught me about teamwork. Those of us in the military know it's not about I, it's about us, and it's the team. That's what we fight for, that's what we do for. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak on this special day. God bless our veterans, our fallen, and God bless America. Thank you.